It's Query and Company.
I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company.
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
So here it is, the Tuesday of the Colts bye week. And yet everybody, you can tell, like we were talking yesterday about what would you do, Jimmy, if you're a player and you're on bye week? Do you take vacation? Do you stay home and just like sleep?
Going to the beach.
I think that's probably the most common answer. But I respect the fact and appreciate the fact that here within this company, even though it's a bye week, we have, because you start at the top. And at the top of the company here would be CEO. And here we have our CEO of Query and Company today, Eddie Garrison, who I don't know if he went to 459 Barbershop. I don't know what he did, but he's got his hair. He looks kind of like Jerry and Newman when the water pressure was out in the building, but he's doing something different with his hair. It looks very proper today.
I didn't do anything different. I just took a shower this morning, and I put my normal anti-frizz stuff in my hair, and boom.
Anti-frizz
Yes, because if I don't put it in my hair, it's bad.
I like the boom at the end. Additionally, I would agree with Jake, and this is a positive. You look like you're about to close a big sponsorship deal for
You
us.
actually look like you're the lead singer of Herman's Hermits.
If I was wearing some Air Force Ones, I would feel like Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, you get some glasses on. I could see it.
Yeah,
I could see it.
That's fair. Definitely fair. Good afternoon to you on a Tuesday, and it's a gorgeous day outside. My name is Jake Query. That is Eddie Garrison and Jimmy Cook, who you just heard from. It is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan. Couple of things to get to right away. First off, I have neglected to, not intentionally, to thank those of you that watch us on the YouTube page, and we would like to encourage you if you are getting ready to go to the office, for example, and you think, man, I'd like to stay on top of the show, no problem. Again, just search out 107.5 The Fan on YouTube. You can watch us live, and to those of you who do that and are in the chat, we appreciate it.
They can join me in the break room. We can have a nice cup of coffee and
That's right.
catch up.
Go to the vending machine. What would you get at the vending machine in the break room, Eddie?
A Reese's cup, probably.
Okay. Jimmy?
Or a bag of chips, depending on the time of day. Today, right now, it'd be a bag of chips.
Honey barbecue Fritos.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Chili cheese Fritos are the best.
Oh, yes.
Chili cheese Fritos are where it's at. In addition to that, as always, you can text me during the show if you'd like to offer your commentary. And then finally on Twitter, the way that you can get a hold of us, my Twitter handle is @JakeQuery. That's JakeQuery. Jimmy, you are?
At the J Cook. TheJCook.
And Eddie, yours?
My name, Eddie Garrison _ EDDIE GARRISON _, and that's because somebody took Eddie Garrison. Don't forget about the show Twitter either. We are at Query _ Company.
Back to your Twitter handle, a.k.a. the _.
Thanks.
Yeah, bro.
By the way, are we done with the Threads thing? Was that like a 48-hour experiment that people did?
I still have an account, but I haven't got on there since that 48-hour window.
Correct. I think that's true with most people, right?
Yeah.
Like I opened a Facebook Threads account, and then here's what was weird. So in order to get a Facebook Threads account, I had to open an Instagram account. But I wanted to get my name secured on Threads in case for some reason Twitter, or X as it's known now, went away. I had, the alternative. I wanted to make sure my name, so I didn't have to do like Jake Query _ or whatever, right? So I went to reserve it, and then I haven't used the Thread thing since.
I would assume that big platforms probably still aggregate stuff over there, but
Correct.
I've not stepped into that.
Correct.
Well,
last night, we'll begin with this as we, the Colts are right there in the thick, and it's strange as it is to say, and we have Purdue basketball to talk about today. We'll talk about the Pacers. Rick Carlisle was on, of course, with Kevin and Andy this morning. You might have heard that conversation. Chris Denari will join us today. Rob Blackman, the voice of Purdue basketball, will join us today. And then Stephen Holder will talk Colts with us. So we got a big show lined up. But last night, what you saw was another, example of kind of the logjam in the NFL, especially in the AFC, Jimmy, in the fact that Buffalo is one of those teams that you fully expected at this point would be one of those that certainly you knew Buffalo or Miami, one of the two was going to win that division, and the other one was like a lock for the first wild card. And now you look at it and you go, wait a minute, is Buffalo going to play their way out and open the door for kind of a Cinderella team like Indianapolis, as crazy as that sounds.
We did bold predictions in the summertime, and I believe Eddie was in this camp with me. We both picked Buffalo as a team that we could see missing the playoffs, that made the playoffs a year ago, just because we were looking for a team to pick. It had nothing to do with how the injuries would stack up for that defense. My takeaway from last night, and I think Eddie's going to be the one to push back, which I'm looking forward to because I want somebody to talk me off this ledge because I really like Josh Allen, is Josh Allen this era of great quarterbacks, Phillip Rivers. And here's why. Very talented, good QB. You can't take that against him whatsoever. But his teams often let him down, and he doesn't take care of the football.
Yeah.
If you're mapping out who that is of this era, it's Josh Allen.
Ben Roethlisberger?
Could be. Though Big Ben ended up obviously winning, and Josh could still do that in his career. But, like, interceptions sometimes aren't always the quarterback's fault, but when you look at his body of work over the last 2 or 3 seasons, the amount of times he's turning the football over is a detriment to Buffalo.
I think the possibility is there in terms of Rivers, and I'm not dismissing the Josh Allen comparison. So I would say in addition to, not opposed to. Justin Herbert may be in that group as well.
Yeah.
Because, big arm, tons of yardage, and then you look at it and you go, okay, 4 and 5, right? But again, I had a conversation with somebody last night where I was saying the most difficult place to be in the NFL is just stuck in that quicksand, as I call it, the vat of mediocrity, the vat of suck. When you get in the NFL, it's like if you're in a well and you're at the bottom of the well, it's pretty easy to climb yourself to, like, it's the first couple of steps are tough. Like if you're a 2 to 3 win team, man, it's tough to get out of that. But then once you get out of that, like steps 3 through 8 are made of like glue and quicksand. It's just really hard to get out of that, like 7 and 9, 8 and 9, or 7 and 10, 8 and 9, 9 and 8 category. The Miami Dolphins did it for literally 2 decades. And then finally, they said to their head coach, like, look, we're firing you because you're actually trying to win. And we want to suck for a while. And it finally, like, it's paid off, right? I mean, Miami had to go through excruciating years in order to get to the point now of having some sustained competitiveness.
They found a brilliant head coach finally. They believe they found their answer at quarterback, assuming he stays upright, which he's done this year. And they took the big swing that often teams need to make, which is a big trade to change the trajectory of your franchise. They did it when they got Tyreek Hill. Yeah, they lived through that mediocrity period that all the teams in the AFC right now, it's literally almost all of them, up until you get to the bottom 2, which is Tennessee and New England. Every one of those teams, from the Bengals all the way down to the Broncos now, are in this potential well, and a couple of them are going to climb out to the playoffs. A couple of them are going to teeter out to the bottom of the well, which is to say a good draft pick, and some of them are just going to be stuck with their foot dangling upside down in the middle of the well. And the Colts are on that path of where is this season going to go for them.
So here's the thing. They're in this well. I like this analogy, right, of like, here's the well. Like, think of the Goonies, right? Like, you see this well down, and you're trying to lift people up out of it, right?
The other well is Silence of the Lambs, and that one's not, I don't think, an appropriate one for this analogy. So let's stick with the Goonies.
Puts the lotion in the back.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have stuck right in the middle of the well right now and trying to get their footing. Like, the Cleveland Browns have their hand on, like, rung number 11 or 12 of the ladder. Like, they can reach to it. But the question is, Cleveland at 6-3 and Pittsburgh, they're on the same rung. But doesn't it feel like Pittsburgh has, like, Kenny Pickett's smaller hands to try to reach up above it? And Cleveland looks like they're heading in the right direction, don't they?
It feels like either they are in the well or they are sitting on the lip of the well, just having a great time, like, hey, we finally made it out, and then one gust of wind is just going to knock them back.
You're talking about Pittsburgh or Cleveland?
Both of them, with where they're at right now.
But Cleveland does feel like, Jimmy, let's begin with that. Cleveland's got, and it's entirely possible that the Colts are going to look back at the end of the year and really regret, like, not taking a knee at the end of the first half against the Cleveland Browns. And that game, that Myles Garrett performance in that game for Cleveland, that might be a huge turning point's probably the wrong word, but a big factor there in the way things end up. But Cleveland does feel like they are going in the right direction, and while there is still a long way to go, it looks like perhaps Deshaun Watson is starting to get some footing underneath him to being probably not in any way, shape, or form the player that he is being paid to be, but at least showing some justification for the reason he was paid as he is.
All they need is something to balance that defense. Doesn't mean that they're going to
Very good point.
utilize that to go to a Super Bowl, but to make the playoffs, that's all they need at this juncture. And it feels like when you look at the back half of the playoff picture, Eddie called this a month ago. I doubt, despite a C.J. Stroud, another chapter in his young career, knocking out the Bengals in epic fashion on Sunday, I'm sure Eddie's take on the Bengals is still that they're going to turn it around and could maybe still win the North. Both are both possible. I'm with Eddie in that I expect Cincinnati to get in. So if you're looking at available spots, I think that the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Jags, the Dolphins will all get in. The Bengals will get in. That leaves you 2 spots for the Steelers, the Browns, the Texans, and everybody that's in that group with the Colts to fight for. And when you look at the Colts' schedule, maybe this all gets put to bed. Maybe they lay an egg after the bye week against Tampa Bay. But the schedule is set up where they're going to stay in that conversation the rest of the year. And people pushed back on me early in the season when I was still on, and maybe you fight for a draft pick. Well, I guess for those people, and you and I have discussed in the past, Jake, I've seen the light on this.
Right.
You're not getting a good pick anymore. So if that means that the option is mediocrity in the draft or getting to the playoffs, make the push. Take advantage of the opportunity. Well, easier said than done. I don't think they have the defense to do it, but they have the schedule to do it, and that might be enough.
Here is the one saving grace for the Colts. And this is why the Colts are in a win-win situation right now. Okay? You knew going into the year that this year was all about the development of Anthony Richardson, right? And so if this year is all about the development of Anthony Richardson, and then Anthony Richardson gets hurt, and now the development is him watching film and nursing himself back to health, then it becomes, okay, it's about doing an inventory of who you have that you could, who are guys you can run with, who are guys that you can move on from, where are areas that you need to really shore up for Anthony Richardson. And the good news, Jimmy, is they are staying interesting. And I think most people here are realistic that if they were to get into the playoffs, they probably would have an appearance very similar to like the Phillip Rivers year where they go to Buffalo and play hard but end up getting beat. I think most people are realistic that if the Colts got into the playoffs this year, probably not the year they're making a deep run. But crazy as it sounds, they are, to your point, in contention. So that in itself is, I guess, a positive, that they're interesting and that they have a chance to do something, if nothing else, to continue to work together as a group, and also to give some of your younger players, you know, the assuming he's healthy, the Juju Brentses, the young guys that you have, the Rodney Thomases of the world, to give them the experience of like postseason football. But the better news is this. When you talk about trying to be in contention for a high draft pick, man, suck for luck. They got to suck for luck. Hey, Marvin Harrison Jr., I get it, right? Everybody wants Marvin Harrison Jr. He ain't fallen past 3, maybe 5, right? Depending on how it slots out. But the positions that you want to draft high for typically, if you are in contention to drafting in the top 5 in the National Football League, usually that means your quarterback is either hurt or not very good, and that's what you need to do to redirect. And the quarterback position is the one that you've got to be in the top 5 to get a guy that is like a franchise player for you. To get a franchise quarterback, you've got to be drafting in the front 5 of the draft, front 10 maybe at most. Now, exceptions to rules, of course, but for the most part. They've got their quarterback. They've got their long-term quarterback. We know that. Assuming he stays healthy, they have the guy that clearly is going to be the quarterback for a number of years. So, now it's just a matter of how many years, right? But for that reason, Jimmy, that means that this year's draft is about continuing to accentuate pieces around Anthony Richardson. Well, the pieces that you would need, their line played pretty well on Sunday. And they do have, Bernard Ryman's a young player. Now, they probably need to start looking at replacing Ryan Kelly eventually. They probably need to start, but Quentin Nelson's going to be around for a while. Braden Smith has been a good player, but again, a little bit of injury there. So there are some areas on the line maybe they could shore up. And clearly they need some help like in the defensive backfield depth and maybe even again on the line. But outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., many of the pieces that they would need to replace or begin to plant for Anthony Richardson are pieces that the first or second best option in the draft are going to be there at 10, 12, or 15. So it doesn't hurt them that much, right? Do you see what I'm saying? And so in that regard, if they were still in a position where they needed to draft a quarterback, then yes, you would want this year to be in the top 3 or 5. They're not in that position. They're going to be okay wherever they're going to draft.
And to clarify that, because I know maybe some Colts fans aren't fully sold yet, Jake and I aren't saying it's a guaranteed lock the Colts have their franchise quarterback. The thought is they believe they have their franchise quarterback. Therefore, they're not going to go and address that in this year's draft because they feel like they have that answer. They are confident in that, and now they want to build around him. And you're right, when you look past the very top of what will be available and the needs they have, like, yes, some wide receivers, some big-name wide receivers within college football could be off the board in the mid-range, but there's still going to be some in that range. Keon Coleman is anywhere from 10 to 13 out of Florida State. He's been fun to watch at times. Could be a good piece for the Colts. There's going to be tight ends available. There's going to be linemen available if they want to go that route. And there's going to be plenty of teams that arguably need a quarterback in a draft class that appears to be rather deep at that position. Whether you think they're going to be good or not doesn't matter. The point is teams are likely going to be going after quarterbacks if they're still in need of one in that middle of the pack range. So, yeah, you're right. Not all is lost if they wind up being there. My argument would be, though, and I think this is what you kind of said yesterday, Jake, even if they're not going to make a run, the lottery, not the lottery, but that's the NBA. But you get what I mean. The back end of the standings, a.k.a. the top of the draft order, likely out of reach for the Colts at this point. And if the pick is going to be inconsequential in terms of the spot you're talking about dropping, why not make a push? Why not take advantage of what the NFL gave you, which is a last place or close to last place schedule, and make a run? They need Gardner Minshew, kind of like what the Browns need from Deshaun Watson, which is just a little step forward. They need Gardner Minshew to just be a little bit better on offense, and that balances things out to some extent for Jonathan Taylor. And defensively, you're going to have weak spots at corner, but whenever they get Juju Brents back, be great, and hopefully they do after the bye week. That at least calms some of the waters for what is troubling this secondary. It's clear you need at least one more piece out there, high-level, competent piece, and even though we might not have projected it right out of camp, the rookie and the Indy native has proven he can be that.
Totally.
That might be enough for you, based on what the schedule is in front of you, to get to the postseason. The only hurdles for them, in terms of real toss-up games, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh,
for sure.
And at this point, Houston. I would put Houston in that mix of how well Stroud has played. And that's week 18.
Houston is, whoever would have guessed, right?
Yeah.
That was supposed to be a gimme. Did you watch Purdue last night?
A little bit here and there.
I thought, when it comes down to it, I thought about this about midway through, and we'll talk to Rob Blackman coming up in just a couple of minutes and discuss exactly this. But I thought Purdue last night, even though Zach Edey leads them again, the thing that Purdue that makes them different than even a year ago, like a year ago with Purdue, and we saw it late in the year, you knew what you were getting out of Zach Edey, but if you could really clamp down on Lawyer and Braden Smith, that really kind of stalled what they were doing. And they've got a lot of weapons now, aside from just that. Kudos to them for going out and getting, tell you what, Miles Colvin, 3 for 3 from the outside. Who knows if that means that he does that each and every game, but he looks to be like a pretty nice weapon for them, obviously.
Not just the confidence we talked about yesterday, but the trust is higher as well within that group.
Right.
You no longer have to feel like if you're Zach Edey, I have to do it all by myself.
Well, and I also think that, and when we talked to Rafael Davis, he pointed this out. I think it's a really good point, though. You now have some backcourt guys that not only can you kind of draw away from the rigors of Lawyer and Smith, because I thought last year in particular Fletcher Lawyer, towards the end of the year, I mean, he really slowed down, I thought, right? But when you've got like Lance Jones out there now that can take away some of the responsibilities of Braden Smith and just be able to not only distribute and run the offense, but score. I mean, if he can get you double digits game in and game out, that's a huge piece for them. They are very deep, and Purdue almost looks and feels, Jimmy, like a team that could somewhat go. I mean, you got Caleb first coming off the bench, which I know that's not totally new for him, but Kaufman-Wren probably needs to up the offensive game a little bit, but they feel like they could do the old like platoon system of 5 and 5 and just constantly have.
I hate to compare the two, but kind of what Indiana wants to do this year.
Right.
Like that's what Coach Woodson ideally would like to be able to do, and Purdue has the pieces and the depth to be able to do that, it looks like.
And they have the continuity already amongst those guys, usually on the floor. The thing last night that I thought happened when I turned it on, it was midway through the first when I turned it on, and it was a 2 or 4 point game, and Xavier was kind of hanging around. And then what you wanted to know was whether or not eventually Purdue was just going to not necessarily go on some massive run, but just wear Xavier down to the point where late in the game, Xavier couldn't keep up. And that's what I think you're going to see Purdue do a lot this year, because they can constantly have 3 to 4 fresh bodies on the floor at any given time. And as soon as the light starts blinking that fatigue's kicking in, you just put in another fresh body. Huge luxury for Matt Painter's group.
This isn't fair, I understand that, but at least in this Zach Edey, Matt Painter combo era, I think we've grown accustomed to expect this, like in terms of what they're able to do in the regular season. And I'm not going to say I'm solely basing on the Purdue season just on March, because that would be unfair to anybody, because it is the biggest crapshoot in all of sports. You don't know what the draw is going to be like. You don't know how you're going to be from a health standpoint when you get from November all the way to the end of the year. But my expectation as I watch Purdue, maybe not to dominate every game, but to feel like they have full control, their thumb on their opponent each and every night because of how well they're built. And it's human nature to then look ahead to, if they're able to have this type of dominant run this year, I'm not saying they're going to go undefeated, but if they have a dominant run like it appears they're poised to, the anticipation is there amongst the fan base and amongst me as a neutral of what is the second season going to hold for them.
Right.
And I get it. You can't get to the end before you go on the journey, but that's where my real heightened senses are for this group. And you have to feel like it's that way amongst Purdue fans as well.
It's interesting because Kyle Guy grew up in Indianapolis, obviously. He's a Lawrence Central guy, pardon the pun. And he was part of, I think everyone knows this, he was the star on the Virginia team that won the national title the year after getting bounced in the first round by Maryland-Baltimore County. Ironically, of course, on the way to that national title, beating Purdue in the tournament in a great finish. And my understanding is Kyle Guy has addressed, I don't know that he went and had went in front of the team, but has talked to a couple of the guys from Purdue about the mental aspect of trying to bounce back from such an embarrassing 1 versus 16 seed defeat in the tournament, and how you rechannel and refocus, which he was able to do in lifting. That was, in hindsight, does Virginia win that national title if the year before they'd gotten beat in the Sweet 16 by Texas? Who knows, right? And I don't know how much that fueled them, but to be the mental fortitude of bouncing back from that kind of an embarrassing loss to UMBC to winning the tournament, that hangs over you. That taste, that disappointment, that cloud hangs over you, and how you answer to that is a real storyline. And it's going to be a storyline whether Purdue likes it or not all year long. We're going to talk to Rob Blackman, and that's going to be the first thing I'm going to ask him. How many times this year do you think he hears Fairleigh Dickinson? How many times has he asked about it? And how many times do the players think about it and talk about it? We'll find out that and more from the voice of the Boilers, and we'll do it next. It is Query & Company here on a Tuesday, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Fan.
Last night, up in the paradise city of Lafayette, West Lafayette, more specifically, Purdue over Xavier, 83-71. Boilers now 3-0 and on their way to take on the Zags of Gonzaga. Joining us now on the program, he is the voice of the Purdue men's basketball program. Rob Blackman joins us. Rob, I'm going to begin with asking you what I just was talking about, and I said I'm going to ask Rob this right out of the gate. And I don't even mean this like in a condescending or flippant tone. I mean, I'm actually being somewhat serious. How often do you anticipate this year that the Purdue basketball team is either going to hear externally or even from the inside the name Fairleigh Dickinson?
Oh, how about infinity? Is that a proper answer? 17,422 times, maybe, if I had to put a number on it. Actually, Jake, Jake and I think, and Jimmy, I think that's actually a good thing, and I think Matt Painter would agree with that statement. He has said a couple of times here, especially in the preseason practices working up to this start of the season, that, you know, look, Purdue dominated the Big Ten last year. I mean, they went 29-6. They won the league by 3 full games. They won the Big Ten tournament and quite frankly, made it look easy. But then they lose to Fairleigh Dickinson. So that is probably a good thing in the long run for this team because it keeps them on edge, right? Anytime they start to feel a little full of themselves, or as my grandmother liked to say, you get a little too big for your britches, it's pretty easy for Matt Painter to just say, Fairleigh Dickinson, and that should bring them right back to earth, crashing back to earth rather quickly. So I don't know that that's actually a bad thing that they do hear the name Fairleigh Dickinson to infinity, because it does keep this group on edge, a group that, quite frankly, as you guys know, I mean, it's returning, you know, almost 90% of its scoring, almost 90% of its rebounding, 90% of its assists, won a ton of games, but, right, the big but, got knocked off by a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. So if there's one thing that's going to keep you grounded and keep you hopefully focused on the ultimate goal of winning games in the NCAA tournament, it is the fact that you did lose to a 16 seed last March.
You know, I find that interesting, though, Rob. There would be that notion, and maybe in the past, Matt Painter has played it this way, you know, after other, you know, Little Rock or one of those. And every team has those NCAA tournament stubbing of the toe. I mean, everybody but one every year, right? But do you think that, like, in the past, did they dwell on how the last year had ended as much as this year? Or is it by necessity because of the humility and the wake-up call that came with it to make sure that, in fact, you're not just turning that page?
Well, maybe maybe a little bit of the humility. I also think a big part of it, Jake, is you're in such a rare situation here in that you're bringing basically back your entire team. That so rarely happens anymore in college basketball, even at Purdue.
Yeah,
where Purdue doesn't lose a lot of transfers, as you know. Most guys normally stick around for 4 or 5 years. So I think that's also part of it. You know, typically when your NCAA season tournament ends, you start putting together the pieces for next year, and normally there are a lot of new faces among those pieces. That is not the case with this group. I mean, outside of Lance Jones and then the freshmen, you know, Miles Colvin and Camden Heide, you know, they're just kind of they're new pieces to the puzzle, yes. But as I said, Purdue brings back most of the same team they had. So I think that's all probably the bigger part of it. You're not starting over. You're not looking at a new season and saying, well, we have all these new faces. Let's try to get these guys to gel and see what we can do. No, you basically have all the same guys coming back. So I think that's a big part of it, too.
Voice the Boilermakers, Rob Blackman, with us here on Query and Company. Rob, how long into the season, because I agree with you, when you return that much of the scoring, that much of the rebounding, that much of the assist makers, you would think natural growth and progression, especially when you had younger guys a year ago, like Trey Kaufman-Wren, like Braden Smith, like Fletcher Lawyer. How far into the season for you before we really see the full growth and the fruits of their labor from another offseason with Coach Painter, or are we already seeing that this early in the year?
I think, Jimmy, we see it probably next week in Honolulu. I say that because the competition level is about to be ramped up to such a ferocious level. I mean, you start with number 11 Gonzaga right out of the gate. If you win that game, you assume Tennessee, which is seventh in the country, you assume they're winning their game, so now you're playing number 7. And then if you're fortunate enough to get past that one, you're probably playing either number 1 Kansas or number 4 Marquette. So we're about to see if this team has indeed taken some steps in the proper direction just because of the level of competition they face. Look, Purdue's a better three-point shooting team right now than they were last year, but it's such a small sample size, and all the games have been home games. So you've been playing in the friendly confines, right? The rims you practice on every day. Purdue's shooting 46% from three. Purdue last year shot 32% from three. That was a real thorn in the side of Purdue's offense last year. Matt Painter would be the first to tell you. This team last year was more skilled than 32% three-point shooting. It should have been better. There's no reason for this group to shoot 32% from three. Now they're at 46%. I don't think that's a realistic number. I don't think it stays at 46. My gosh, if it stays at 46 all season, Purdue could maybe run the table. It would be that good. But again, I don't think that's realistic. That's the one area I have seen, at least early in the year, where Purdue has really improved. But again, and it's hard to judge from these first 3 opponents. But I think after those 3 games next week in Hawaii, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to judge and see if we think this team has taken some steps forward.
Rob, let me tell you one of the points that I've been watching out of curiosity, and I'm curious whether or not this is me fabricating my own storyline or there is some legitimacy to it, okay? And I've mentioned it a couple of times. I thought last year Smith and Lawyer, and I think you and I talked about this maybe even in May, I thought they were fabulous last year. I mean, 2 guys that came in and just played their tail off and really exceeded expectation for the better part of the season. And then in February and March, I thought both of them, particularly Lawyer, understandably so, just kind of hit that freshman wall where just their legs turned to lumber. How much of the development of Colvin in particularly, but also the play of Jones, is critical towards giving those 2 guys some flexibility over the course of the year to keep them fresh and take some heat off of them late in the year when you most need them to then be able to be at their best?
Yeah, good point, Jake. I would also throw Camden Heide in that group too, as a guy that can play on the perimeter and can give those guys some minutes. What has happened early in the season when Braden Smith has been taken out of the game, Lance Jones has moved to the point guard position. If for whatever reason both are out of the game at the same time, then Ethan Morton has become the de facto point guard, which isn't all bad because he's a senior. Now, he's not the talent level of those other 2 guys, especially offensively, but he is a senior, and you know he's going to take care of the ball and make all the right decisions, get you into offense. But, yeah, you know, last year Purdue would get stuck, and you guys watch enough Purdue basketball last year, you know this. Late in the season, Purdue would get stuck offensively if Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer were not giving him anything from the perimeter. It just became a matter of, well, we're going to throw 3 guys at Zach Edey. He's going to have to pass out of a double team or triple team. We'll just dare those other guys to make shots. Well, they weren't making shots, and you had no other option. You couldn't go to the bench and bring in anyone else that was going to be a shot maker. That, again, we're early in the season, so I have to say this, cautiously. But what we've seen early in the year is, like Miles Colvin comes in off the bench last night. He takes 3 shots. They're all threes, and he makes every one of them. Doesn't even touch the rim on any of the 3. I mean, what a luxury to have. If, say, a Fletcher Lawyer's having an off night, you can bring in a Miles Colvin and know that you have a shot maker. Same with Camden Heide. He has shot the ball well from the perimeter. Plus, he's a willing defender. So, yeah, that can definitely play a huge role, and Lance Jones has been as good as advertised. It was interesting because he transfers to Purdue without a whole lot of fanfare, despite the fact he'd been really good at SIU at Southern Illinois. But Matt Painter kept telling us, hey, this guy's the perfect fit for us. He's exactly what we need, but he wasn't a headliner guy. He wasn't a guy that, was on the front page of all the college basketball websites talking about top transfers. No one really thought much about it. Well, we found out he is a great fit for Purdue. So just more shot makers. That's the one thing that kind of dawned on me as I was driving home after the game last night. Last year when Purdue could not make perimeter shots, which unfortunately was often late in the season, you were just stuck. There was nowhere else to turn. That doesn't appear to be the case right now. You do have guys you can bring off the bench that can be shot makers for you, and again, take the burden off of Zach Edey, and hopefully get teams out of this mode where they love to double and triple team him and dare other Purdue players to make plays.
Our guest is the September 3rd born Rob Blackman. See how I remember this time, Rob.
Thank you.
I remember this time. He is, of course, the voice of the Purdue Boilermakers. A year ago, Rob, they were so dominant with Zach Edey. I mean, understandably, right? The guy was the best player in college basketball, and there's no reason to believe he won't still be. But did Purdue come up with new wrinkles? Are they going to – is this just like, hey, rinse and repeat? It worked last year, barring one game disappointment. Let's just stick with what worked. Or did they work the offseason, and have they worked in the practices in coming up with some different things to avoid having to be so reliant on Zach Edey?
I don't know how many new wrinkles are in the offense. I can assume there are a few. Again, so much of that is personnel-driven. Purdue has the athleticism now that they did not have last year in guys like Miles Colvin and Heidi and Lance Jones. I know we keep talking about those three guys, but their athleticism is off the charts. Purdue didn't have any of that last year. So that does change things for how you're going to look at things offensively, and especially trying to get Zach the ball. But, and again, Coach Painter, he brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and it really hit home with me. The fact of the matter is, you can't look at just one bad game in the NCAA tournament and totally blow up your offensive philosophy and start over. The fact is, last year Purdue was 12th in the country in offensive efficiency. They spent most of the season between 1 and 5 in adjusted offensive efficiency. If you look at Purdue's numbers against the top 100, I didn't realize this till Coach Painter mentioned it. Purdue against the top 100 last year was number 1 in the country in offensive efficiency. So obviously they were doing something right. If it works, there's no reason to go and change it. Again, there's probably some wrinkles, but it has more to do with personnel than it does actually offensive philosophy, because the numbers would tell you last year, if against the top 100 you were the best offensive team in the country, then you don't want to make a whole lot of changes there just because one game went bad on you.
Rob, I have a little bit of a rooting interest in Miles Colvin just because I had the opportunity to cover him as well as his sister Raven during their time at Heritage Christian, her on the volleyball side at Purdue. So I want to see him make good on top of the fact that he's a local product as well. When you look at him as a freshman, 11 minutes last night against Xavier, if he continues to perform well, is that probably a sweet spot minutes-wise, or is there room, despite the depth on this Boilermaker squad, for that to increase as the season goes on?
I would look at he and Camden Heidi's numbers because they play the same position. 11 minutes last night for Miles, 10 for Camden. I would guess, just from listening to the coaches speak on this topic, that's going to be a varying amount of minutes for those two guys, depending on who's playing well or better in that particular game. Now, last night both were playing well, so that's why they played just about equal minutes. But there are going to be games when one's going to be better than the other, and that's the guy who will play. The other thing I would add to that is the guy who decides to guard and play really hard on the defensive end, he will be the guy that probably stays in the game just because that's the way Matt Painter is wired. Again, the beauty of those two guys, man, they can score. Not only are they really athletic and they are willing defenders, they're just young guys, so they're still learning. But they could, look at, as I mentioned, Miles comes into the game last night, knocks down 3 3-point shots. He barely worked up a sweat, and he made it look easy. He's been instant offense. Camden's done the same thing, I think, in the season opener. Cam came into the game. He wasn't in the game 5 seconds. Caught the ball on the left wing, shot a 3, and made it. So those guys are not only are they willing shooters, but they can make shots. The one that's playing the better on that particular evening, especially once we get into Big Ten play against the better competition, the teams that can really, really come at you on the offensive end. The guy who's guarding better is probably the guy that's going to see the most minutes. But regardless, those guys, if they're both playing well, you probably see what you saw last night, 11, 10, 12 minutes for each of them. If one guy's playing better than the other on that particular night, that'll be the guy that gets the bulk of the minutes at that position.
Hey, Rob, do you know there was a Rob Blackman that played for the Colts? Were you a fan of his? Did you wear the jersey and stuff?
Oh, no way. Really?
I'm not kidding you. I looked it up. Robert Blackman, a former American football safety in the National Football League, drafted by the Seattle Seahawks in the second round of the 1990 draft, played college football at Baylor, also played for the Indianapolis Colts in the 97-98 season. He was a second-round pick in 90 out of Baylor. Now, that means he played Indiana in the Insight.com Bowl, the Copper Bowl back then, the last bowl game Indiana won. He's from Bay City, Texas, not to be confused with the Bay City Rollers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you should get a Rob Blackman Colts jersey. That'd be pretty awesome.
Wow, I can't believe I did not know that.
Now, you played football at Evansville, right?
I did, yeah. About that same time. Actually, I played at Evansville from 89 to 93, so roughly the same time he was in college.
Now, when you played at Evansville, what number were you?
33.
33. What position were you?
Wide receiver.
Now, what wide receiver wears 33?
Well, when you're really low on the depth chart, you get past the numbers.
I was going to say, like that. So you're the dude that played like safety and wide receiver, right?
Yeah, well, now that you bring it up, yes, I showed up on campus as a free safety and quickly got moved to wide receiver. I'm not sure if that was good or bad, but again, when you're low man on the depth chart, you don't really get to pick a cool number.
How many total receptions in your Aces career?
What was that? You cut out for a second.
Total number of receptions in your Aces career, which, don't get me wrong, hey, listen, I didn't play college sports. I mean, good for you, right?
14.
That's impressive. Any touchdowns?
What? In 4 years?
Dude, it's 14 more than I had.
Well, I guess the funny thing, since Evansville dropped football in 97, there really are no records that were kept. So I could have just lied to you there. I probably should have lied and said 114, but no, it was 14.
So they dropped football. How many passes did you drop? How many footballs did you drop?
Probably 14 plus. I'm assuming.
You were 14 of 30 in your career, right? Hey, in basketball, that's not too bad, Rob, right?
That's not too bad, but that's probably why they didn't throw the ball my direction very often. I think I was more of a blocker. I was more of a blocking wide receiver.
Rob, what's the ceiling this year for Kaufman Wren? He's a guy to me that's really intriguing because, man, you've seen the flashes where this guy can play. And part of me wonders if it's just the fact that the low post is so dominant by Zach Edey. What is the ceiling or the role, if you will?
You know, it's so interesting, and I'm glad you asked that. He or Braden Smith, either one you could have picked, they were our best player in Europe on the European trip. You know, Trey averaged 18 points and 9 rebounds, and I understand the competition is not the level you're going to see here in Division I college basketball in the U.S., but still good players. And Trey was just so dominant over there, but he was playing without Zach Edey. Remember, Zach was with Team Canada playing in the FIBA games. So he really had, the run-of-the-mill in the low post. He was the go-to guy. I think the problem for him now is making that readjustment to the fact that Zach Edey is indeed on your team, and you have to find a way to coexist with him in the low post. He certainly is more than capable. We saw the one game Zach Edey did not play in last year, the New Orleans game. Trey played in that game and had, if I remember correctly, 24 points, 9 rebounds, or something like that. I mean, just dominated. But the trick for Trey is trying to learn, again, how to coexist with Zach. And I think there's a sweet spot there. I think he will eventually find that sweet spot, and that's going to be a great position for him to be in. But, yeah, he has proven that when he's the number one option in the low post, he's pretty darn good. But when Zach Edey's on your team, you are not the number one option in the low post. You are option number 2. And so he just needs to get that part figured out.
You know, it's kind of like when Mark Janes called you to ask you to be on the IndyCar radio network. The big caveat was you had to learn how to coexist with me. And that was a challenge in itself, right?
Yes. And you know what? I've been meaning to tell you this. Did you know Stingray Robb also has a September 3rd birthday?
Does he really?
Yeah.
Stingray Robb, by the way, is responsible for one of the more awkward moments that I've ever seen when Stingray Robb was at a press conference that was being held by Honda because he drives a Honda, and when they asked him why he was named Stingray, he said, because my dad's a fan of the greatest sports car ever, the Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. I'm like, well, might want to hold that one off, right?
Yeah, you need to look that up. He also has a September 3rd birthday. So
does Charlie Sheen.
when we're doing an IndyCar broadcast and Stingray's a part of it, there are 3 September 3rd birthdays involved.
What are the odds of that, man? Then we can just
What are the odds?
Swing by some wrongdoing stuff and bite Charlie Sheen into it, and we got ourselves a quartet of fun, right?
Jake, you got to teach him the trivia that you got.
Lastly, Rob, I meant to, and thank you, Eddie, for mentioning that. You are getting ready to go to Hawaii, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know the state fish of Hawaii?
Oh my gosh, the state fish?
Yes.
Rob, just give up now.
It's the huma huma nuka nuka wapawaha. Now, here's the thing, Rob. If you could, now let me tell you this. If you work this into the broadcast, I can't tell you. I mean, I don't know what the prize would be, but if you can say in some point in a radio broadcast, and we'll play it on these airwaves till the cows come home. The state fish of Hawaii is the huma huma nuka nuka wapawaha. Now, say it with me. Okay, you ready? Huma huma.
Huma humu.
Okay, no. Huma humu.
Oh. Huma humu.
Okay, nuka nuka.
Nuka nuka.
Apawaha.
Apawaha.
Now say it all together. Huma huma nuka nuka wapawaha.
Can't do it.
Come on, man! I'm telling you. You say this.
When you see the spelling,
Rob, here's what you do. You ready? Smith to the right side, now to Lawyer. Inside Zach Eady turns, puts it up, made it look as easy as saying huma huma nuka nuka wapawaha. Boom, right there, easy.
Now, how would you like it if I called you and told you how to do your job?
People do it every day, Rob. People do it every day. Listen, we have the same birthday. I can do these things. Rob, enjoy it. Appreciate the time, all right?
Okay, gentlemen. Thank you.
All right, aloha. Huma huma nuka nuka wapawaha. I'm telling you right now, people are saying to themselves, why does this guy keep saying this? And you know what? I guarantee you, at least one person yesterday, at least one, and at least one today, tonight at dinner is going to say to somebody at the table, you know what I learned today? The state fish of Hawaii. Okay, here's a good question somebody just asked me. Is it legal to fish for said fish? Now, see, I'm assuming they just texted me the question and put said fish because they didn't want to have to spell out huma huma nuku nuku apuaha. I don't know if
Can you say it?
Huma huma nuka nuka apawaha.
See?
Huma
rolls
huma
off the
nuku
tongue.
nuku apawaha.
Boom. See? I'm telling you.
I practiced 85 times in the mirror
Last night. I could not say it. Yesterday, I couldn't say it after you were
say
saying
86, it appears in your living room. What's that?
I couldn't say it yesterday after you trying to explain it, like break it to us phonetically. And then I looked at the spelling, and then I was able to say it.
Yeah, there you go.
Because it is spelt exactly how it sounds.
How would you like to spell it? Can you
I'm
spell
not spelling it. It's too many letters.
The huma huma nuku nuku apuaha. Chris Denari is the television voice of the Indiana Pacers. He is in the city of brotherly love because the Pacers had so much fun playing the Sixers on Sunday, despite losing by 11, that they're going to do it again tonight at 7 o'clock, and Denari joins us next.
Hey, JMV here.
105.5 The Fan.
Chris Denari is the television voice of the Indiana Pacers and noted Hootie and the Blowfish fan. Now, Chris, before we get talking about the Pacers and the 76ers, part duh, because they just played on Sunday and they're playing again tonight, I hate to throw these guys under the bus.
My goodness.
Chris, I'm doing the show here with not one but two guys who just asked me to name a Hootie and the Blowfish song because they didn't know any songs by them.
I felt confident I'd heard one, Chris, and I was right.
Now, have you ever felt more old in your life, Chris?
Yeah, I feel very old now, very old. I mean, granted, they're coming up. They're touring this summer for their 30th anniversary.
June 8th.
Yeah, I'm going to see them twice in Cincinnati and Ruoff back-to-back.
So I want to
already got that on the schedule.
I was going to say, I really want to go see them June 8th. It's the weekend of Road America for IndyCar, so we're going to have to figure out the travel on that. But I really do want to see them. I was supposed to see them, gosh, would it have been, didn't they just tour like 2 years ago for like a cracked rear view celebration or something? And
yeah, I think it was, gosh, it was almost 5 years ago. Yeah, I think it was 2019. It was the summer before COVID.
I was supposed to go see them in Cincinnati, and there was a conflict. I think it was an IndyCar conflict, and I couldn't go, which that album was just so good, man. I mean, and I know they had more.
Still, Jake, it's still, I mean, if you Google it, I think it's still one of the all-time greatest-selling albums of all time.
Oh, I know, yeah. I believe it broke the record for highest-selling debut album of all time, and I believe it eclipsed Appetite for Destruction, which had previously eclipsed Boston. I'm pretty sure that's correct.
You know what's funny? I'm a longtime Hootie and the Blowfish fan, and love Darius Rucker's country stuff. And it was a number of years ago that Debbie Antonelli, my partner for the Indiana Fever, does a great job on CBS during the NCAA tournament and all that. I was down in Charleston, and she surprised me that Hootie and the Blowfish was having a concert raising money for education down in Charleston. And I had never met any of them. I had gone to concerts, but, hadn't been backstage or anything. All of a sudden, she surprised me. She goes, "Hey, come with me." And went backstage and met all the guys, and that's the first time I'd been back there. And it's funny, when I started talking to those guys, they all went to South Carolina. Mark Bryan, one of their guitar players, and they knew at the time, they said, "Well, you're the voice of the Pacers." I go, "Yeah, well, man, we wish we could. That's what we all wanted to do when we were in college." And I said, "Well, I think you could do what I do a whole lot easier than I
no
could
question.
do what you do."
No question.
I mean, but yeah, it was really cool. And like I said, I got hooked into them. I was working at Butler in around 93, 94, and they went on Letterman and made it big. But one of our interns came back from spring break, and she had been down in South Carolina, and she goes, "Hey, Mr. Denari, I saw this band. They were really good." And I go, "Oh, what's their name?" And she goes, "Hootie and the Blowfish." And I'm like, "What's the Hootie and the Blowfish?" So that was my first. And you can ask my kids. I mean, I have two 30-year-olds and a 27-year-old. I mean, they were inundated with Hootie and the Blowfish back in the 90s.
Now, we were just talking, Chris. Do you know the state fish of Hawaii, which sounds kind of like Hootie and the Blowfish? Do you happen to know what it is? We've been talking about this all week.
I do not know.
The huma huma nuku nuku wapuaha. That's the state fish of Hawaii. Now, Purdue's getting ready to play in Hawaii, and I was telling Blackman if he can incorporate huma huma nuku nuku wapuaha into the broadcast, that I don't know, give him $1 or something. Can you do that tonight, do you think, during the broadcast? Huma huma nuku nuku wapuaha?
You may have to text me the phonetic pronunciation.
I'll start now, and I'll get the text done by tip-off.
It's sort of like back in the day, Sharunas Yasikevicius, right? I mean,
that's right. That kind of I remember with Sharunas Yasikevicius, they said, just remember saying lots of cabbage.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, okay, and then it was easy to remember. So, Chris, I'm assuming, by the way, and I should know this because Rick Carlisle was on with the guys this morning, but the team stayed in Philly, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Stayed here. Yeah.
So what adjustments can be made when you do – I know it's not a back-to-back, but it kind of is, right? I mean, you have the day in between, but what things can be learned other than not letting Maxey and Embiid go off, which is such a huge – right there. I mean, you're talking about two elite players. What tweaks can be made from 2 nights ago?
Well, I think talking to the players yesterday at practice, specifically Aaron Nesmith and Bruce Brown, who are two of the better defenders, they said, "Look, we got to play with more force. It's really hard to guard those guys on the pick and roll." I mean, it's funny if people watched when they had success. Nick Nurse just went to that side pick and roll with Embiid and Maxey seemed like 10 possessions in a row because they're so good. And Maxey, I said on Sunday, Jake, it was like he was a video game. He was a cheat code. I mean, the guy could not miss. But you've got to play with more force, and you've just got to figure out a way to be more physical with those guys and bump them off their spot. You may have to give up a foul here or there, but I think it's being more physical and just making some adjustments in how you handle that pick and roll. Then I thought in the second half, they allowed some other guys to get going. Nick Batum, who won't play tonight out with personal reasons, hit 3 threes. Beverly hit 1. So, I thought the Pacers did a good job adjusting during the game to take a 17 to 19 point deficit into a lead in the fourth quarter. So they just have to continue those adjustments they made late in the game.
Chris, how much does it change from a Pacers perspective? Obviously, the margin for victory would increase on the Pacers side, but how much does the outlook tonight change if Embiid is forced to sit? I know he has questionable designation right now with the sore left hip. They play Boston tomorrow night. Where do things change from a Pacers standpoint if you take away one of the best big men in the game?
Well, there's no question it's the biggest change, and quite simply, the numbers are like this. I mean, I got it right in front of me. With Embiid on the floor against the Pacers, the Sixers are 13-4 in his career. When he does not play against the Pacers, they are 7-2. So it tells you that he's just a monster. I mean, he's had a 59-point game earlier this year. I mean, what he did the other night against the Pacers with 37 and 13, I mean, he's averaging 32 and 12. So it's not like the Pacers are the only team he does this to. He's in a great place. I think Nick Nurse has done a really good job with him. They've really taken him. I thought over the last few years he took way too many threes, and he can make them, but he is so devastating down low on the block and in the paint, and that's really where they put him. So absolutely, if he is out, I mean it's a huge advantage for the Pacers because you don't have to go against the defending MVP.
Chris, of the players who are getting significant minutes at this point, and at this point, I think we're looking at probably, for the most part, a 9 to 10 player rotation that Rick Carlisle has used. Which player is most in need of finding game-to-game consistency?
Well, I guess I would say, as I look at him, is Benedict Mathurin. I mean, he's maybe struggled a little bit early, had 2 really good games, outstanding games last week against Utah and Milwaukee, and it wasn't just the points, it was the rebounding and the assists. I mean, they've asked him to do more, to be a better all-round player, and he wants that, and he's adapting to that. But you're going to have some games as he tries to do all of those things where, maybe, he's not as good as he was. I mean, the other night he had 9 points and 5 rebounds and, did not make a 3. So you'd like to see him get a little bit more consistent. I think Obi Toppin, you'd like to see a little bit more consistent in the starting lineup. But other than that, I mean, Halliburton's been great. Miles Turner's been outstanding. I think Bruce Brown does what Bruce Brown does. I mean, last week against Milwaukee, he had a near triple-double. He had 11 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. And then you're getting great play off the bench. I mean, right now, the bench is the leading bench scoring unit in the NBA. I mean, the real deal for this team is to somehow get a little bit better defensively. I don't think they have to be great defensively, but they have to be better. Because right now they lead the NBA in all offensive categories: points, efficiency, assists. Their three-point shooting is top 3 in the league. So offense is not a problem for this group, but they've got to become a little bit better defensively.
I have seen several occasions this year. Chris Denari is our guest. Chris, I've seen so far this year several times where Bruce Brown, Giannis comes to mind, where Bruce Brown is out guarding players on the wing far bigger than he. I mean, he's only 6'4". Is that because he is such a bulldog defender, or does that show the necessity for true wings that Indiana has upping themselves defensively to be able to alleviate that size difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have 2 guys that can play a little bit bigger than they are.
Nembhard's the other, right?
Nembhard and Nesmith.
And Nesmith, yeah.
Nesmith does a good job. I think he's one of the Pacers' better defenders. And, if you look back at last year, I mean, Bruce Brown, he defended everybody from 1 through 5 when he was in Denver, and he's more than willing to do that. And so, that's one of the things that he talked about yesterday was, especially in that two-man game, just doing a better job on the ball and on the drops and how you handle the pick and roll. But he goes, look, you're not going to win them all. I mean, these are, Tyrese Maxey right now is playing at an all-star level. He's had 4 or 5 straight 25-point games. I mean, this is a young man out of Kentucky that is, he's really, really good. And then you have Embiid. So you just got to try to do all the things that you possibly can to slow these guys down. You're not going to stop them, but you've got to try to slow them down a little bit.
Chris, I know this is objectively a weird question. Chris Denari, TV voice of your Indiana Pacers, with us here on Query and Company. I know it's objectively a weird question because this is such a brand new concept, but does it feel any different on your end? And does it feel any different within the Pacers locker room that you win this game and the road is paved for you to get to the quarterfinal and move on to the knockout rounds of the in-season tournament? Does it feel any different than it does a year ago in your mind and then within the team?
A little bit. I think it does. I mean, when you get into the building, too, and it has a different look and a different feel, yes, I would say that. And but it's a work in progress. I mean, I've visited with a number of people here, and I've asked, do you go to 8 games in the in-season tournament in group play and have a home and home and sort of take about a 2.5 or 3 week period and all of your games that you're playing are in-season tournament games to keep it consistent. And that way, okay, you're home with Philadelphia, you're on the road with Philadelphia. But I do think it gives a little bit more added muster to tonight's game, knowing that if you can win, and you want to bounce back after a loss on Sunday, but if you win, maybe you're in the driver's seat to get to the quarterfinals, and then it's sort of a one-and-done NCAA tournament type thing. So, sitting here, my preparation is the same. I think that, this is an important game for the team to bounce back from a loss. They're currently 3rd in the Eastern Conference. So I don't know if we'll really know all of those things until we get through this year and see how they either keep it this way or make adjustments. But I think once we get in the building, especially, and you see the different floor and get the different feel, it will feel like what it's supposed to be.
Chris, what did you do in the off day in Philly?
I went to practice. I took a walk around Philly. It was a pretty nice day. I did not walk the steps, the Rocky steps.
Right.
I have done that before and gotten a picture. When we got here on Saturday, went out to dinner with 2 of our digital people, our digital reporters and stuff.
They're real people. They just work in digital, right?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
They are real people.
Sure,
yeah.
I thought maybe it was the lady from Mass Ave. You know what I mean?
AI is making strides,
that's right.
Jake.
That's right.
And they are real, and it was good to visit with them. One of those, DJ, moved back here. He worked for the NBA for a number of years and does a great job. His wife is from Indiana, so they're sort of happy to be back. And then Logan is a Butler grad who, they're both young and excited about what they do, and so that was fun to visit with them. And then yesterday went to practice. We went to Temple. So that's the really cool thing too about during the course of the year is the off days that the team practices. We'll either practice in that team's respective practice facility, or a lot of times we go to colleges. And as the voice of Butler for so many years, I was in a lot of college arenas. But it's cool to go into some of the places that I've never been before.
Did you ever go to the Palestra in Philly?
We talked about that last night. We should have gone to the Palestra. I think Villanova was playing last night. But I have been there before on the campus of Penn. It's nostalgic, just like walking into Hinkle Fieldhouse, Allen Fieldhouse, those types of things.
They had, actually, when I flew on vacation a week ago, Chris, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, we flew through Philly. So we landed in Philly, and when I was moving through the Philly airport, they have along the wall movie posters of every movie that has taken place in Philadelphia. And you'd be so many of them, you're like, man, I totally forgot about that movie being in Philadelphia. Aside from Rocky, your favorite Philadelphia-based movie is what?
And
you got The Sixth Sense was one of them. You've got Philadelphia, obviously, with Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. Trading Places was one of them that was filmed
Trading Places here?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, or part of it was at least.
I'll take Trading Places then. You've helped, gave me an assist. You were Tyrese Halliburton with one of your 17 assists there. Jake.
Listen, Chris, how amazing is it that a guy can have a game where he's got 17 assists and not a single turnover? Unbelievable.
You know, and he's overshadowed in the game. But it's not a surprise what he can do. We look back last year, he had a 3-game stretch in November where he had 40 assists and no turnovers. I mean, that's the beauty about Tyrese Halliburton. You're going to, just the course of a game and the pressure you're under, surely you're going to turn it over, once or twice. But this guy has been brilliant with the basketball, plays with such joy. So glad that he's, on the Pacers, and he's a very, very special
and he's
player.
23 years old, Chris.
23 years old. There's a great article on the Ringer right now. The reporter Rob Mahoney sort of was with the Pacers for about a week. And it's a tremendous article if you have a chance to read it in the Ringer.
By the way, Penn upset Villanova at the Palestra last night. I didn't realize that. Little city of not so brotherly love going on there, right?
Yeah, and the Palestra is on the campus of Penn, so that's a home victory for the Penn Quakers.
Pacers Sixers in season tournament tonight, 7:00. Chris Denari, TV voice of the Pacers, with us. Chris, always appreciate talking with you. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll catch up here soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
Chris Denari, one of the best, man. The Sixth Sense. I start treading lightly and talking with you guys about movies.
All right.
To me, The Sixth Sense of the Philadelphia movies. Rocky was great, but The Sixth Sense to me was really good, man.
Yeah.
That movie was really good.
It's an all-timer in that genre. It's the pinnacle of M. Night Shyamalan's career as a director.
Definitely that, right?
Which was his first real feature debut.
They literally kind of went down from there, right? Yeah. What was the Village? Do you remember? Did you ever see The Village?
Yeah.
Like the whole time his other movies, the whole time you're waiting, you're like, well, this is all going to be worth it because it's all going to come together. And a couple of them, it came to the end, and you're like, really?
He hit rock bottom in terms of stuff with After Earth. That was that Will Smith, Jaden Smith movie. It was awful.
Was it worse than Lady in the Water? That was really bad.
Close.
That was really bad.
But he's gotten back on track a little bit.
What was his last one? I'm trying to think.
He had I can't remember if it's called Old or what it was, but the last movie that I remember him releasing was these people get stranded on a beach that, like, if you go too far on the beach, it rapidly ages you or de-ages you.
Or you could just start talking about movies with you guys.
Right. That too. Still waiting for the invitation.
I'm telling you, you guys are both coming over to watch doubleheader of Shawshank Redemption, followed by Good Will Hunting for Eddie, because Eddie's never seen.
Yeah, you got to see Good Will Hunting,
which is a great movie. Colts, we'll get back into that conversation. Last night, something happened that might actually have some impact on the Blue Horseshoe. I'll explain next.
1075 The Fan.
I told you. I mean,
I knew this song. I didn't realize I didn't know you were thinking of the High School Musical song yesterday when we were talking about this.
You're going to go home tapping your toes, singing along to the Huma Huma Nuka Nuka Wapaha song, right?
Totally.
I'm telling you.
Just going to put it on repeat for the whole drive home.
Or maybe I go back and just watch High School Musical 2. I don't know.
Let me tell you something that's going to happen with
I won't
you guys.
do that.
I had a conversation the other day with Mark Dykton. And Dykton was like, and for those that are unfamiliar, before doing this program with you guys, I obviously was on the mornings before Andy got here with Mark and Kevin. And one day, randomly, 2 years ago or something, I don't know, I mentioned that I thought the Zero candy bar was vastly underrated. I was like, you know what? Like, I was in the gas station, and I asked the guy behind the counter, like, what's the candy bar that no one buys? And she goes, oh, it's a Zero bar. And I'd never had one. I go, okay. And I thought, well, it's appropriately named then. So I bought one and took a bite of it. And I'm like, this is fantastic. Where has this been all my life? I thought it was the best. So
103 years old with a Zero bar.
Yeah, well, you don't last that long. It's just like Love Heating and Air. They've been 103 years. How does Love Heating and Air last so long? They're the best, right? So at any rate, I was talking about it, and those guys hadn't tasted one, and so Dykton thought he disagreed with me. He's like, yeah, it's okay. And he said, like, to this day, he goes out and people talk to him about the Zero bar. And I'm predicting for you guys that at some point in your future, you're going to be at a Pacer game, or you're going to be, in Eddie's case, at 459 Barber Lounge, hopefully, and someone's going to come up to you and say something. They're just going to go, oh, the Huma Huma Nuka Nuka Wapaha.
Counterpoint. I think that scenario happens, but I think it is far more likely that the conversation goes, hey, man, I still think about that fish that Jake mentioned that one time that's the state fish of Hawaii. I feel like it's much more likely that happens instead of them
as
saying,
opposed to the Wapaha.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Or, hey, I'm in the company.
That's my goal. I just want people saying they're in the company. Just come up and tell me you're in the company. That's what I want to know. Last night, Monday Night Football, you guys watched how much of the, you had a decent amount going on yesterday. You had Purdue playing, obviously, against Xavier, and then you had the Monday Night Football game, which we haven't even discussed the ridiculous ending to that, right? In terms of, here we are, we're going to miss a kick, and then, you got too many guys on the field for Buffalo, so let's get a redo, and then you hit the kick. And so Buffalo now 5-5. How much of the game did you watch, Jimmy?
I watched all of the second half. I was casually monitoring it during the first half.
Okay.
Because, quite frankly,
Fair.
I didn't think it would be a high-level game. I figured Buffalo would eventually pull away, and they would get close to covering the 7.5 they were favored to do. And they had a tight game with Denver all night long.
Yeah.
And lost.
I guess give credit to Denver, but
Look,
Buffalo, man, something's going on with Buffalo. I'm telling you. You guys said it at the top of the show, and you're right. We said at the beginning of the year, there's always some team that just doesn't put it together, and nobody can figure it out why, and all of a sudden you're like, maybe they're not that good, and maybe that is Buffalo right now, right?
I always felt that way, or I felt that way because Tre'Davious White always gets hurt. Matt Milano always gets hurt. They haven't changed the skill position players around Josh Allen other than the tight end position since 2020. It's been Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox. It's been those three guys for the last 3 years, and I don't know why they expect different results.
By the way, Eddie, how did things go last night with your
Did not partake last night.
I thought that this was part of this vision you had.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Took last night off.
Okay. And then so back at it tonight, is that right?
Possibly, yes.
Okay. We were talking about Eddie's degenerate problem.
Didn't the Bills fire somebody at the end of last year? No, last year.
Ken Dorsey today.
I know they did, but last year they fired somebody.
Leslie Frazier.
And he was or OC?
Defensive coordinator.
DC. Okay, so they fired Leslie Frazier a year ago and I really like Sean McDermott.
Now,
so
when
I
they
feel
fired
bad for him.
Dorsey, did he attack his laptop and throw it all over the place?
He
question.
He actually threw the iPad. He stole it and threw it 4 times at the back door and then left. No, so for my account on Sean McDermott, I really like him. I do. But you've had your DC be a scapegoat last year, and I figured we'd at least get to the end of the season. No, we're past that point for Buffalo. Now, after that debacle, they fire Ken Dorsey. At what point is it either Sean McDermott's or Josh Allen's fault? At one point, is it no longer, we
Fair.
got scapegoats to clean up. I will give Buffalo a bit of a benefit of the doubt on the defensive side. They've been injury-riddled for a large portion of this year. But and I get it, it's a different market, right? Notre Dame extends a little bit down here, so it gets a little bit more cachet. But I know it's happening nationally. Marcus Freeman has not enough men on the field in that last play against Ohio State earlier this year, and gets called out rapidly for it. And the same thing is happening nationally today for Buffalo, because you mentioned how that game ended. As bad as you've played, and if you're asking, is Denver actually good? Well, yeah, if teams lose the turnover battle 4-1 the rest of the season, Denver's going to make the playoffs. Yeah, if that anomaly continues to happen, sure, maybe they'll make the postseason. But for Buffalo, as bad as you played, especially down the stretch, you have an opportunity to still win that game if a kick goes just a little bit off, which it did, but you also can't count. You have 12 men on the field. Denver gets a retry. That's all she wrote. They're a mess.
Denver also missed 2 extra points.
They did.
Well, what happened last night
said they were a good
was
team.
Buffalo, when the Colts season began, you always know that when you get into that situation, and I shouldn't say nobody, very few thought that we would be sitting here talking about a Colts team that could realistically win 9 or 10 games. And I do think that that's still within. Now, a little bit hard to assess completely because the last 2 weeks they have beaten the 2 worst teams in each respective conference. You know, the Patriots probably aren't one of the 3 worst teams in the league, but they're the worst team in the AFC for sure. And then Carolina. I mean, those are 2 pretty anemic teams, and the Colts beat both of them. I don't think they were resounding necessarily in the way that they were playing. But give them credit. They've got 5 wins here, and they have already they're on pace to exceed what was anticipated for them on this season. But the challenge becomes when you start getting into that 7 to 11 win range, which there's a log jam always. There's a traffic jam of teams that are trying to accelerate to the playoffs, trying to fall back a little bit because they know they're not going to make the playoffs and they're working for draft pick, et cetera. And in the Colts case, Buffalo yesterday looked like they're merging lanes. Buffalo looked like they basically said, you know what, we're going to get out of this left lane and get over. And do you want in now? Do you want into the wild card positioning here where you are now only a half game behind Houston for the final playoff spot? The Indianapolis Colts right now are a half game behind Houston for the final playoff spot in the AFC. And they've got not only Houston left on their schedule, but Cincinnati and Pittsburgh as well, who are up there just in front of them in traffic. It's hard to think. It feels like Miami, barring collapse, is going to probably get the AFC East, and then Buffalo gets relegated into that wild card conversation. And, I mean, at this point, there's no reason to believe. What leads you to believe that Buffalo's going to put it together?
Nothing. There's nothing that's going to believe me they're going to put it together. Firing Ken Dorsey doesn't do it. The schedule that's left for them doesn't do it. Here's the stat I was looking for. Since he entered the league in 2018, no QB has more turnovers, 93, than Josh Allen does over the last 5 seasons. Some of those turnovers, you can say, oh, they're not his fault, it's a tip pass. That argument gets thrown out the window when it's at that number. He's had more turnovers than he has games played this season. I don't see it. I don't know how it gets fixed unless they get a little bit healthier defensively, but they still have to go through, in terms of tough opponents versus easiest opponents. For Buffalo, they still play Philly, Kansas City, Dallas, and Miami.
Yeah, that's rough.
The Colts, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Houston, and the Raiders are viewed as their toughest remaining opponent.
By the way, Leslie Frazier took a leave of absence. He wasn't fired. I misspoke on that part of it. But yeah, it was
permanent though, correct?
Just a season off. He's back next year to coaching, but I don't know.
In Buffalo?
I don't know.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, like with Buffalo, I always have this feeling that they always struggle against teams they should dominate, and the front half of their schedule was just super, super easy that they would just like walk in, show up, like, oh, we got this, and then second half of the year, they didn't have a good schedule because of how hard it is.
I kind of tend to agree with what you were talking about, Eddie, just in terms of they haven't addressed the areas that needed to be addressed. But the point being, you look at 2 teams at 5-5.
Name me a team. Name me a team that you feel like could threaten the Colts making the playoffs in terms of in that running.
Well,
5 team. I want to share with the audience
of the 5 and 5 teams,
because I want to share with the audience toughest opponents left on those schedules.
Read off for me the 5 and 5 teams.
A lot of tabs. Here we go. 5 and 5 teams are in that range.
Okay, I mean, I've got it right here.
Go ahead.
Okay, so you've got the Bengals 5 and 4. Okay, the Bengals you feel like the Bengals are actually they just found an opening in, and I realize the Bengals are.
They have the toughest strength of schedule left of anybody in the league.
But
if
they're healthy, it feels like the Bengals are whatever.
I'm not saying they're going to bottom out, but they have the toughest strength of schedule remaining.
The Texans. The Texans are one that it's like, okay, nobody thought that the Texans would be here, but they feel like they're trending in the right direction.
Houston has the 4th easiest schedule left in the National Football League.
The Raiders. The Raiders are one that feel like at 5 and 5 that they're kind of like the Colts in the fact of like, how are they 5 and 5 and can they really sustain this?
Look, I understand there's some bias showing here, and it's great what is happening over there with Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas. Take them out. They have the 2nd toughest. They still have to play the Chiefs twice, and they play Miami. They also have a head-to-head against Indianapolis, which could be a toss.
But the Colts, look at the Colts schedule. I mean, you've got the games against Pittsburgh and Cincinnati are critical for Indianapolis. The game coming back off bye against the Bengals is a massive game for the Colts.
Yep.
It's a massive game.
But you have enough wiggle room, and I know the team isn't thinking like this. I'm just talking about from a fan's perspective and from us looking for a playoff path for them. If you include Houston in that mix, okay, that's 3 tough games for them left. After that, our remaining opponents, the Raiders, the Titans, the Falcons, the Buccaneers. I said this when they played New Orleans. It didn't work out because they got everything handed to them. I said it when they played Carolina. They are better than those teams. They are better than the Raiders. They are better than the Titans. They are better than the Falcons. They are better than the Buccaneers. They win those games, go into the postseason.
Here's the other thing the Colts need to keep an eye on.
Sure.
The Houston Texans right now are a half game essentially behind Jacksonville. In the standings, they're a game behind them, but they've beaten them already, right?
Yep.
So the Texans would have the tiebreaker as it stands right now over Jacksonville. Obviously, the two of them play again coming up here a week from this Sunday. But if you're the Colts, you don't necessarily want Jacksonville sliding down into the wild card competition with you because they swept you. So you'd rather have Houston hanging around there. You'd rather have Jacksonville win the division if you're the Colts. You don't want you know what I mean? And obviously for the Colts, they still have a game with Houston left too, right?
Correct. And in theory, this is just based on the eye test. I would have to go through and look at the simulation models. But there is an insane world where maybe you see this is going to happen, but you see 3 AFC South teams get in.
No way.
With how jumbled up everybody is,
zero chance.
Again, it's insanity, but that's how tight the race is right now.
Now that you mention it, well, here's the thing.
It probably evens out with tiebreakers.
It's more likely if there were going to be 3 teams from the same division, it's more likely it's the AFC North.
Correct. Yes.
Because who thought Baltimore? Baltimore is literally like that. Just that pesky pimple that just never goes away, right?
Yeah.
Every year. They're good every year. But I do think Cleveland is I don't think you want Cleveland hanging around the party because defensively they are so good, and you don't need a lot from Deshaun Watson, but he's starting to play a little bit. He had a couple of plays, I thought, on Sunday that were really good plays. And when you match that with that defense they have, that's going to put them in good position.
In terms of strength of schedule, Cleveland and Indianapolis are basically neck and neck. Toughest opponents left for the Browns: Jags, Steelers, Bengals, Texans, Colts, Steelers, Bengals, Texans. So basically everybody's the same except the Jags.
Who's the best team in the league?
To take the bias hat off, we'll say Philly. If Kansas City figures out their offense, it's them, but it's Philadelphia.
Okay. Eddie, best team in the league.
I think it's Philly. I don't know. I'm not.
By the way, Monday Night Football.
I'm skeptical about them still.
Chiefs, Eagles, Monday night.
I think the best team in the league when they're, and I get it, consistency plays into.
You going with Eddie's horse?
No.
Okay. Well, no, he had a different horse prior to today.
No, I didn't. I said that it wouldn't surprise me if we were talking about them.
Okay.
I said they're the most complete team.
Who?
Cincinnati. I said that 2 weeks ago.
It's not them either. Okay, go ahead.
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yep.
I think when they're healthy and clicking, San Francisco is the best team in the league. Because especially now with the bookends they've got defensively, and then the fact that they have some versatility. People forget. I mean, I know the Niners have 3 losses, but Deebo Samuel's banged up.
Yeah.
When you have Deebo Samuel and then Christian McCaffrey playing at the level he is, and then you have now Chase Young opposite side Bosa. I mean, they're really good.
Look, we don't talk about it because in this market, it doesn't have the same impact. It doesn't have the same interest level because it's an AFC town. We're always talking about the AFC playoff picture, and I kind of said this before the season started. I like and appreciate and admire what the Lions are doing. They're a feel-good story. I want them to make a big run. I want them to turn the whole league upside down. It's Philadelphia, San Francisco, and that's Philadelphia and San Francisco are here. Detroit is like right here, and then it's the rest of the conference.
I would tend to agree with that, yeah.
Like,
and actually, and here's the other thing. Here's a better question. Who's the Indianapolis Colts of the AFC or of the NFC? Stew on that.
The Vikings.
He said stew on it, Jimmy. Come on now.
My bad. Sorry.
We'll just go ahead and give the soup to everybody right now. We were going to come back with that.
Eddie hasn't revealed his yet.
And you haven't either, Jake. So we're still two out of 3 of us are good.
It's not bad.
It's the Vikings. Because they are, I mean, whoever would have thought that Minnesota was going to be in this position.
I disagree.
Can I get the prize that you were going to give to Denari and Blackman if they would have said huma huma nuka nuka apuaha?
It was $1.
Oh, well, I'll take it.
Actually, I've got 5 pounds in my wallet.
I disagree, by the way.
I don't know if you know this or not, but my wallet's extra heavy this week because I've been carrying around 5 pounds all week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Minnesota, surprising people. The guy that was supposed to be their quarterback is out. They have to come in with a backup that's been able to sustain, actually play well for them, and they're 6-4.
But Eddie, we could save yours for after the break.
Boy, that's going to keep the people hanging around. Stephen Holder, by the way, joins us at 2.
The Fan.
Okay, Eddie, what team did you say are the Colts of the NFC?
The Atlanta Falcons.
And give me your rationale for your explanation.
They're 4-5. They're right in the thick of things there for their division title.
4-6.
Now the Colts, or what'd you say?
4-6.
No, they're 4 oh yeah. I was looking at Tampa Bay. Sorry. 4-6. But yeah, they're right in the thick of things there for that division title. They turned things over to Taylor Heineke because things aren't working out with their second-year quarterback Desmond Ridder. They have a nice running back in Bijan Robinson. They got a nice wide receiver in Drake London. They have a nice tight end in Kyle Pitts. The Colts have fascinating pieces offensively, just like Atlanta.
What pieces do the Colts have offensively that anybody would list as fascinating?
There's Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor, and Michael Pittman Jr.
All right, that's 3. Yeah.
You think Michael Pittman Jr. is a fascinating offensive piece?
Yeah, because, he hasn't had a competent quarterback, really.
I don't know that Downs has taken the national stage yet, but he definitely made an impact.
I think Josh Downs is a nice player.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said fascinating or intriguing.
Yeah.
I didn't say they were stars.
Also, their coach is trash, and I don't think the Colts have a trash coach.
Okay.
He looks like Ted Lasso, though.
He shaved it.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Scared and upset a lot of people.
The Falcons are, outside of Zach Osterman that lives here in town and grew up in the Atlanta area, literally, you have, there are several things on the planet that would be, give me something that people have been searching for forever. They never found
the Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail. You have a better chance of finding the Holy Grail than finding 5 diehard Falcons fans in one spot.
I think Tampa Bay could be comparable to the Colts, too, ironically.
You think so?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Tampa's any good at all. I think they're circling the drain. But by the way, Stephen Holder's next.
Live and 107.5 The Fan.
Now, I probably should admit this, but that JMV right there, I realize he said he's paying a visit to moms in Greene County. I thought he said, I'm going to go visit some moms in Greene County. And I'm like, hang on, what?
Fascinated to see how you transition to Stephen Holder.
I was thinking to myself, wow, okay. Stephen Holder actually did not hear me incorrectly like I just did that spot when we were sitting at a Pacer game at the beginning of the year, because we were talking at that time about the absurdity of a couple of the Washington Wizards putting up like 50 million shots. And he sent me a tweet today that was like, look, other people have noticed it. Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma are putting up like 50 shots a game. And we're like, yeah, go Wiz, right? Stephen, we're prophetic, right?
The plus-minus figures were astounding. And I don't even know that I can explain plus-minus, but I kind of get it. They were unbelievable. It is exactly what we were talking about. Guys who put up numbers that mean nothing.
2025 guys, man.
Congrats.
Hey, Stephen, Stephen Holder of ESPN, of course, covers the Colts, joining us here on the program. So, Stephen, we'll begin with this. The bye week for the Colts, I'm going to kind of give a glimpse behind the curtain, if you will, for people. Just in talking to players in general, as I know that you do, and just kind of getting the lay of the land, what % of the roster do you think actually like goes on vacation during the bye week as opposed to just lays at home and, you know, relaxes and tries to get their body right? And there's neither one of those is right or wrong, by the way.
Right. Yeah, I actually think it's probably a fair split, you know, sort of a 50-50 split. There are a lot of guys that will take trips and will go off somewhere and take a break. And I'm actually totally in favor of that. I mean, if I didn't have stuff going on and, you know, kid in school and all that, I might do the same this week, you know, but I get it. I think a lot of guys do that. Probably, I would think at least half do that. And I haven't taken a poll necessarily, but I do think that you can kind of balance both. You know, you can kind of get away and also still take care of your body and eat right and those kinds of things. I don't think that necessarily having, you know, a bunch of workouts during your bye week is necessary. You know, if you take 4 or 5 days off, and maybe you have a run here and there, but I mean, you don't have to necessarily get in the gym and go crazy. I think it's okay to let your body rest for a little bit. And I think they're actually encouraged to do that to some extent. You're not going to lose all your conditioning in a few days and that kind of thing. So, you know, as long as you do it smart, I think that guys are encouraged to kind of take a load off. I think it's necessary. I mean, 17 weeks, frankly, it's longer. It's more like 25 weeks or whatever it is, you know, from the time they hit training camp to the end of the regular season. I mean, it's a grind, man.
Stephen, if you were to look right now, as the Colts have reached that point of the break in the grind, the area that they need improvement that most surprises you or was the least expected area that at this point in the year would need solidarity is what?
I think defensively they're just too inconsistent right now. Now, that sounds strange coming off of 2 games where the defense essentially won the game. Literally, the past 2 games, they won primarily because of their defense. Their offense didn't score nearly enough points in and of itself to win. The defense, you know, handled most of it. So anyway, the reason I say it's surprising is because I thought coming into the season, I thought there were fewer questions about the defense than the offense. Now, certainly the offense has changed. Jonathan Taylor didn't play for a while. Anthony Richardson's out for the season. So that didn't go according to plan necessarily. But I had lots of questions about what the offense will look like anyway, particularly with, you know, young receivers, a new quarterback, et cetera. What I thought they would get on defense has just been – I just think they've been wildly unpredictable on defense. You know, I go back – all you have to do is go back 3 weeks to the New Orleans Saints loss. They gave up 511 yards in that game. I mean, where did that come from, you know? And so Granted, there have been lots of injuries on defense. Grover Stewart's suspended, so I can explain it to some extent. The secondary, the injuries they've had back there, for example. So I can kind of explain it, and it's maybe not unexplainable, but it's surprising, I guess. So if they can get some stability there, then I like their chances better because I know they can run the ball and they can kind of play the game they want to play offensively. They just don't have a lot of explosiveness there, but we knew that.
Stephen Holder of ESPN.com joins us. Stephen, you know that the league is set up for if you have a bad season the previous year, you're going to be rewarded with a schedule that reflects that because the NFL, despite what people may say, is built to some extent on parity. Maybe not in regards to championship contenders, but in terms of playoff appearances. When you look at the Colts right now, are they a product of their schedule or are they a product of a team that really is starting to turn a corner and rightfully belong in that playoff conversation? Not to take anything away from what they're doing, but where are they in terms of that conversation?
Yeah, well, there's definitely lots of socialism in the NFL, right? Wherever you stand politically, that is a fact, okay? So let's establish that, and it has helped them. There is no question about it. I mean, I think if you look down the stretch, I think they have, 7 games left. 3 of those teams, well, let's say it this way, 4 of those teams have losing records. So certainly that is a product of where they finished in the standings last year. I believe it's the Bills. I was looking at their schedule. I mean, they have an incredibly tough schedule the rest of the way, just as an example, right? And that's a team that won its division last year. So you get those first place pairings with the other divisions and their champions. So that really, makes things tougher for you. There's no doubt about it. It might only affect like a quarter of your schedule, but that's a lot. You know what I mean? That's the difference. Those 3 or 4 or 5 games could be the difference in your season when you're talking about a league where, the first place and last place teams in a division can be pretty close together at times, particularly if you look at the NFL right now, the AFC in particular. Every division is just about really jumbled up in terms of the standings. So anyway, to the question, and I'll stop rambling, but to your question, are the Colts a product of that? It has helped them. There's no doubt about it. It has helped them. I still think they have overachieved a little bit, and I don't know what their final record will say about that. And maybe their final record won't suggest that they overachieved. But I just think if you look at them from a week-to-week basis, I mean, they've been in every game for the most part. They've been very competitive, even in games they've lost. They've won some games they shouldn't have won. I mean, like, who thought they would go to Baltimore and win, for example? So I just think the eye test for this team has been they've probably overachieved, and even while being, like, really disappointing in some areas, So they're a strange team, man. They don't really make a lot of sense. And I actually wrote a story that kind of said that today because I don't understand the Colts. They're a weird team. Nothing makes sense, but here they are, and let's just see what happens.
Stephen, when you look at teams that are kind of those weird teams, right, that are right now, and I know we're only like just a little over halfway through. I get it. But if you look at the teams that are in that log jam of wild card potential, you got guys like Cleveland or Cincinnati that you feel like can ascend away from that. I do think Cleveland has the potential to kind of put things together here. Then you have other teams like the Raiders that you look at and you go, really? I mean, does anybody really take the Raiders serious? And the Jets are at 4-5. Do you see the Colts more in that Cleveland-Cincinnati area where they're actually kind of rising, or do you see them in the be happy that you're here now?
Yeah, I see them in the latter category, and here's why. It's not that I don't think that they can ascend. They possibly can. I mean, they keep defying our expectations. So they have proven that they can overachieve. They've proven that. The difference is, though, like, they don't have the offensive firepower that some of those teams you talked about have, and ultimately, that's your trump card, when all the chips are down, particularly if you have it at quarterback, when nothing else is going right. If your quarterback can put a cape on and go make a play, that's everything. And this is a really, really bad example, but Gardner Minshew kind of did that on the last drive on Sunday when, he's running around, he's under pressure, and they're backed up to like their 10-yard line, and they really need a first down to kind of move the chains and run the clock. And he just somehow, him and his happy feet, which drive me crazy, but him and his happy feet run around and finally find Josh Downs, who just makes an unbelievable play to help his
That play was
quarterback.
great, yeah.
It was a great play. So anyway, now, Gardner Minshew, I'm not counting on Gardner Minshew making that play most times. However, it's just an example of, like, in that moment, what you need is magic. You need some kind of magical answer to this problem you have, which is, like, we need somebody to make a play. And so when you have that at quarterback, the Colts don't have that consistently. But I'm just saying, the teams that do, they can rise above those situations and find a solution, potentially. I give them the benefit of the doubt in those situations. And, Cincinnati would be one of those. I think the Browns are becoming one as well. I mean, Deshaun Watson, we were having a completely different conversation about Deshaun Watson like a month ago than we are now. So we'll see how it goes.
Stephen, Stephen Holder of ESPN is our guest here on Query and Company. How long do the Colts give this year? And maybe the answer is permanently. But how long do they give Shaquille Leonard to start to show production before they take a serious look at whether or not they bring him back next year?
I think that look is already ongoing.
Actually, let me rephrase that. How long do they give him before they make the determination on next year?
Well, they won't decide anything, I think, till it's all said and done. But I mean, if he were playing better, I don't even think you're even broaching that subject right now. Internally, I'm talking about. I'm not talking about us. I'm talking internally. Now, no one has told me they're talking about it, but, I mean, we're not stupid. I mean, they're just like us. I mean, they have the same conversations we have, okay? And when you're out there looking at your team, you're always thinking about it in terms of now and in the future, And if you're in the personnel department, your job is to win now, but your job is also to project and to think about where you're going to be a year from now and 2 years from now. So they're constantly thinking about those things. So what I'm saying is I would be stunned if they haven't already broached that subject. Like, what do we do here? And particularly because Shaq, as is his right, has been very vocal about the situation. I don't necessarily have a huge problem with that, but I'm just saying, it's not like it can be swept under the rug. I mean, he's talking about it repeatedly. And so anyway, the backdrop here is I thought that was perhaps his worst game on Sunday, unfortunately. I thought the week before he had showed a few signs of progress, even though there were also some plays he missed in that game, right, in Carolina. But I thought in recent weeks, I thought I saw a spark. I saw a guy, okay, you're thinking, all right, maybe he's turning a corner. That is not to say he was back to where he was. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is I saw a shade of Shaq Leonard here and there. But then what I saw Sunday was the opposite of that. And, look, the play in the flat to Zeke Elliott, I mean, that was just everything that you've come to expect from Shaq Leonard. He failed on that play. You've come to expect him to get to the football quickly, and then when he gets there, make a sure-handed tackle. And he did neither in that particular instance, and it was really jarring to see it. I love Shaq Leonard. I mean, he has been the embodiment of passion and competition and everything, since he came on the scene. And he's struggling to recapture that now, and it's just really hard to watch.
Stephen, I want to give you an opportunity to join in a conversation that we had yesterday, and I'll begin it with a question. So let's say on a 1 to 10 scale, since Grover Stewart has been out of the lineup, 10 being the most and 1 being not much at all, he has been missed to what number?
Oh, at least an 8.
Okay, which leads me to this second question. When Grover Stewart first got the suspension for performance-enhancing substances, a banned substance, whatever it was, the narrative or the thought process to me, at least, immediately was, boy, this is really bad news for this guy in a contract year. That is not good because he's been a good player, and then this happens. Has this oddly actually helped his marketability in a contract year?
I hadn't thought about that. If I'm his agent, I'm probably going to spin it that way. Absolutely. I'm using that to my advantage because tape don't lie. Look, the Patriots had a season high in rushing yards on Sunday. And the reason for that is because DeForest Buckner can only be in one place at a time. Someone else has got to make a play. And they're having a hard time finding, a solution next to DeForest Buckner, particularly against the run. And you can certainly Zaire Franklin and the linebackers can make lots of tackles and do make lots of tackles, but if guys are getting pushed out of their gaps, I'm talking about the defensive linemen, if they're getting pushed out of those gaps, then those linebackers are having to make tackles against running backs with a full head of steam, and that's really difficult, So that's why you're seeing some of those linebackers getting dragged 3 and 4 yards as they're trying to tackle these guys because they're not getting held up at the line of scrimmage. So it's really tough right now. I agree. I knew that they would miss Grover Stewart. I think his void has been much more evident than I even thought it would be. It has been huge. And I agree. If I'm his agent, I'm using this to my advantage 1,000%. As weird as it sounds, as ridiculous and hilarious as that might sound, his absence has been glaring.
ESPN Stephen Holder is our guest. Stephen, I know, at least from a colleague of yours, James Boyd, mentioning that Kwity Paye was out for that last series, but I know he left some time in that game with a hamstring against New England. He'll have the bye week to recover, so who's to say he's not ready to go when they come back against Tampa Bay. But if Kwity Paye is forced to miss any time, how does that impact things defensively for them, while including the thought of, even though it's a different position on defense, they would return a rising rookie in Juju Brents, hopefully, over that same span? How does it impact and change things defensively, those two?
It wouldn't help. Well, I'm talking about Kwity Paye, first of all. I mean, it wouldn't help, certainly, because I think their defensive line and their pass rush generally is predicated on using their depth to impact the quarterback. I mean, they don't have a Nick Bosa, where you can just say, okay, go get the quarterback, big guy. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how their defense has functioned. They do it with a rotation. They do it with waves of pass rushers. And that's why you see Dayo Odengbo, for example, getting some results there. He's one of several guys that are rotating in there, trying to keep them fresh and trying to keep guys in positions where they can find some matchups. So if you take away a key piece of that, it eats into that rotation, and it certainly hurts. And I also think that Kwity has some real run defense proficiency as well, where he can be a factor there. That didn't help either, that he had to miss some snaps on Sunday against the Patriots, setting that hard edge on the strong side. So that would hurt. Juju Brents would definitely give them a spark. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend Juju Brents has been like perfect this year. I think we've probably glossed over some things with him just because he has made some huge plays, but that's okay. I mean, I expect that from a rookie. I expect it to be up and down, and it has been, but that's okay. What he brings, that physicality, that competition, that the juice that he brings, I think there's a lot of value to that. So let's see if he can make it back. Another guy I'm just flabbergasted by that he's still out is Jelani Woods. I have no information on what's happening there. I keep asking, and they keep saying soon.
And that's reportedly a hamstring, right?
Yeah, I mean, that thing must be torn off the bone or something. I mean, I have no idea what's going on. He's been around. He's rehabbing. I see him all the time. So I don't know. I really thought this was a year where we would learn if he could be like a guy, like for real. And I think he still could be, but I don't know that we're going to learn that this year at this point.
Stephen, your daughter, do you have a daughter in college? Is that right? Or soon to be in college?
She's in high school. She's a freshman in high school. Son,
freshman. Okay,
she's the younger.
Okay,
yeah.
so you're still saving up money for your daughter's eventual college tuition, just for example. Okay,
right.
So to assist in that endeavor, if you were able to,
do you want to contribute? Is that where this is going?
I got 10. You know what? I just got back from Europe. I got 5 pounds in my pocket.
We just got the numbers back from the company, and as a shareholder,
that's right.
Maybe he's got some windfall coming.
Stephen is the key shareholder. Actually, you do need the 5 pounds in my pocket based on the So, if retroactively you could go back to the opening day of training camp and buy a player for what at the time you thought they were going to be worth, and now just past the midway point, sell them for the way that they have actually been contributing to the roster, the guy that would net you the most money would be who?
So I think it might be Zach Moss. Now, granted, he got one touch on Sunday, and I don't think his playing time is necessarily going to be robust in the coming weeks because Jonathan Taylor is, he looks like he's starting to look like the old Jonathan Taylor. Now, that being said, who among us thought Zach Moss was capable of what he did, right, I would say, over the first 6 weeks? No one. I mean, I'd be the first to tell you, I thought he was kind of just a guy. I thought he was just a guy, and frankly, that might say more about Buffalo than anything else, which is a whole other story, but timely given what's going on up there.
Okay, so then the opposite of that question would be the guy that would have cost you the most money because you really thought going in he was going to be a key. And I'm not talking about guys out to injury. I mean, Anthony Richardson would be the obvious answer. But guys that you thought were really going to be key contributors, and as of right now, not named Shaq Leonard, you're like, man, it just has not been his year.
I would say Alec Pierce probably, and not because I think Alec Pierce is not a good player. I'm just saying he just hasn't been a factor, and I think there's blame on both sides. I think the player could do more. I think the coaching and the quarterback could do more. In fact, I wonder if there's not even more blame to share on that end of it, the coaching and the quarterback end of it. He also is a victim of the quarterback change. There's no doubt about that. Anthony Richardson, the best thing he does is throw the ball deep. The worst thing Gardner Minshew does is throw the ball deep, okay? And Alec Pierce is their deep guy. They're asking him to run a lot of clear-out routes that take him down the field, and a lot of those routes, frankly, are giving room to guys like Josh Downs and Michael Pittman to make plays underneath. Now, no defensive team is putting on the tape and saying to themselves, "Oh man, we got to stop this guy Alec Pierce." But they also know he has speed. He can, if the opportunity arises, go make a play down the field. It's not like they can ignore him. So they're aware of it and they're cognizant of it, and you have to play them accordingly. So anyway, the point is the production has not been there, however, and that's been a little bit disappointing compared to what I thought his potential was this season, particularly with Anthony Richardson.
Stephen, the Colts have said, Stephen Holder's our guest from ESPN. Jim Irsay, I believe, is the one that has said at one point he had made the comment that if they had the number one overall pick, they still would have taken Anthony Richardson, which means they would have bypassed C.J. Stroud. Does that tell us, A, they totally misevaluated C.J. Stroud, B, they totally believe in and have seen something in Anthony Richardson that so far we just haven't been able to see because he's been hurt, or C, that's a total smokescreen and they were just saying it to build up their guy?
Well, I think impossible to know, but I think you definitely convince yourself that your guy is the guy. There is definitely truth to that. Now, this is not me saying that I think Anthony Richardson isn't going to be as good. I have no idea. No one does. But But yeah, I mean, you're at that point. They have been or had been at that point totally invested in Anthony Richardson for months, as far as I can tell. I do believe that to be true from everything I have seen. So, he's speaking through that prism, if it makes sense. That's what they had been locked in, laser focused on a guy. So, I think he gets a little benefit of the doubt being that guy being Anthony Richardson. So, look, I also think that the conversation around C.J. Stroud was very interesting before the draft. I mean, his lack of mobility. Look, it's not like he's some kind of statue, but I mean, he's not a guy who's looking to get out of the pocket or run. So that was definitely I think a mark against him from some teams, just because today's quarterbacks they look different than he does. They just do. But the one thing that has shown up is you could always see his accuracy at Ohio State. It was the best thing he did was throw accurately, and ultimately that matters in the NFL a lot. And I just think to some extent we may have underrated the importance of being accurate over other qualities, and C.J. Stroud is a great example of how much that matters.
Stephen, last thing from me. We mentioned potentially a way to get more windfall your way, and I have a financial endeavor that you could be a part of. I understand I sound like I'm trying to sell you snake oil here. That's not the case. Eddie, please awaken Robin the Genie. Okay, Stephen, the terms are very simple here. Robin the Genie inside his bottle takes a little piece of paper and writes down your answer to the following. And if at the end of the circumstances surrounding said question you are deemed correct, $1 million comes your way from Robin the Genie, though I will admit he's sometimes late to pay up. I'm still waiting on a payout from him. Nevertheless, with 7 games to play, do the Indianapolis Colts make the NFL playoffs?
Oh, I'm going to say no, but they're really, really close.
Okay. Stephen, do you see the impact I've had on these youngsters? Aren't you proud? Do you weep?
I see it. Whether that's a good thing, we can discuss that later. But I see it, yes.
Hey, there was an article about the performance from Dio Odengbo from one of your ESPN colleagues saying that Mac Jones likely sees Dio Odengbo in his nightmares. Do you see Jake in yours?
It depends on whether I win this bet. We'll see.
That's right.
I think that because it could be a nightmare or it could be a very pleasant dream. I guess
actually, Stephen, you know what? Based on the Mac Jones comment, did the Colts officially end the Mac Jones in New England era?
Oh my! Is it bad if I say let's hope so?
Well, here's the thing. That to me, and the reason I ask it, half flippantly, right? But
yeah,
if in fact they did, then did that not in effect end the Bill Belichick possibly era? And I don't mean for Belichick to get fired, but if Belichick knows that he's now got to go out and get another quarterback and start this all over again, he's 71 years old. I mean, doesn't he say, you know what, I'm good?
I think the odds of that are going up by the day. No doubt about it. It's been rough. It's been rough. So we'll see. I think there's going to be great drama in New England after the season potentially here. And I do think Mac Jones has been benched, by the way, previous to this game. He's been benched on a couple of other occasions. I mean, at some point, what are we doing? Right.
Well, especially when the game's on the line and he goes out to me, and I have, I thought about this, and I thought for so long we thought that Tom Brady was a guy that was just benefiting from the Belichick system. And then I think that they looked at Mac Jones and said he's a guy from collegiately that was playing in the Alabama system, and so it would be a smooth transition for him to maintain that, just system format. And I don't know whether it was Mac Jones or, quite frankly, whether or not Belichick probably didn't get the right system around him and didn't draft well, right? And here we are.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I don't know. We're living in pretty interesting times, I think. We've seen the end of a dynasty, and then perhaps the fallout from the end of said dynasty coming up.
It'll definitely be interesting to watch, but people here would be thrilled if they knew that they contributed towards the beginning of the end.
So.
Stephen, enjoy the bye week, man. We appreciate the time.
All right, guys.
All right, Stephen Holder, ESPN.com. .com. Interesting stuff on the Patriots as well. I realize we're in India, not Boston, but certainly Jeff probably would be upset if he knows we're talking about the Patriots.
One reason maybe he stays, the Greg Popovich effect. By that I mean a lot of talk about Pop maybe hanging it up, not from the Spurs, but nationally was the conversation, and then a generational talent walks through. Maybe if the Patriots don't get rid of him first,
that's a real good point.
Maybe Caleb Williams or Drake May
really good point.
makes him want to hop.
Is Caleb Williams' stock dropped at all?
Yeah, I think a little bit.
Especially just, whether or not he was serious about like the ownership and that kind of thing. I think it seems like there might be some diva there that you don't want to deal with, but who knows? He is a great talent, no question. That's a really good point you brought up, Jimmy, about whether the Patriots get in the sweepstakes for a Caleb Williams or, there's obviously several good players, but Caleb Williams, I think he was the surefire number. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think it feels kind of like RG3 and Andrew Luck, does it not?
Yes. I think the overall consensus, and Eddie, I want your thoughts on it too. I don't think we are either, but the overwhelming consensus when you talk to people that scout it and follow it is it's a very deep class, and that May and Williams were viewed as the top jewels you could have. But definitely to start the season, I would say Williams was ahead.
Drake May, interesting because when he started his career at North Carolina, it was thought that he was like a, kind of a chosen one, so to speak. And he has done little to matter of fact, it seemed like he kind of became off the radar a little bit, and then now he's surged back where people are like, yeah, they know he's a pretty good player. And Williams is an unbelievable talent. There's no question about it. He is a fabulous player to watch. And by all account, everything I've seen seems to be a nice guy. I just, there have been, he's turned the ball over a little more this year, but he's also, the poor guy, man, he's playing with a defense that
makes the Colts secondary blush.
Totally. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. He is the type of player, as is Drake May to some extent. And really, I root for this every year when the QB class comes out. Not that I don't do it for other players, but you get what I'm saying. I want them to end up in an ideal situation where they can grow and develop. That is to say, with a competent coaching staff, not necessarily the weapons, but a coaching staff that wants to get the most out of him, that can get the most out of him. And I would argue in the same way that those coaching juices, not that they ever left for Greg Popovich, but he understands what is in San Antonio right now with Victor Wembanyama. And it is a highly touted commodity. Not to say that Williams and May are at that level, but it's enough to want to start from scratch and build it all again. And I would be fascinated to see whether it was May, whether it was Williams, and the Patriots still have to do a little bit more losing for that to happen. I would like to see what happens in the development of that quarterback with that coach versus seeing him in, Atlanta.
What sort of things do you want to see from the Pacers tonight?
Somebody not get 50.
Yeah. And that's, it's very easy to be discouraged by what happened Sunday night in Philadelphia. Philly's a team that, first off, Joel Embiid has always given them fits, right? He gives a lot of teams fits, but he is just such a unicorn. But when you add in, Maxey getting 50, you actually have to be kind of encouraged, oddly as it sounds, by a game where you have two players combining for nearly 90 points, and yet realistically you still kind of were in the game for a long time. That was an 11-point game, and I know this sounds ridiculous to say it this way. It was an 11-point game that really didn't feel like an 11-point game.
Yeah, you still had opportunities.
Philly didn't have a single player off their bench score a point.
Are you serious?
Well,
yes.
We talked about during the break, a little peek behind the curtain here, about sounders we haven't used in a while. I have a tinfoil hat moment.
Oh, really?
That I'm ready for. But the plot twist is...
Here we go.
It's not my tinfoil hat.
No, what happened, Eddie?
What?
Where'd the tinfoil hat music go?
Isn't it on a loop?
No. It was never on a loop. I was strictly told by somebody that it needed to only be 4 seconds long or 5 seconds long. We didn't need it drawn out.
Okay, well, if you got directions...
Was that me that said that?
Yes.
I don't remember that.
All right, well, can I get it one more time? Eddie Garrison, you wore the tinfoil hat today in a conversation that we had about tonight's injury report for Philadelphia.
I did.
And I would like you to share with me what that tinfoil hat might be.
Oh, I just think Joel Embiid's probably not playing tonight.
But why?
So he's already listed on the injury report with a sore left hip. Tomorrow night, Philly plays Boston. That game is on ESPN. And with the new
penalty for sitting guys out.
Primetime rules in the NBA.
The what do they call it? The non-load management rules or whatever?
Yeah. So I would assume that he would sit tonight because it's a back-to-back, and they'll need him tomorrow night, and he has to play tomorrow night. I don't envision Joel Embiid playing back-to-backs this early in the year because, historically he hasn't done it.
So I'm putting the hat on with Eddie, and this is a preview to the plays of the day. He does not play, and the Pacers win.
Ooh, bold prediction.
I don't know, man. I think the Pacers, he is of all players in the league that literally salivates probably more than any about seeing the Pacers, it would have to be Embiid. He has been, and I know
they haven't won in that building in 5 years.
I know, it's incredible. It literally is a house of horrors for sure, right? There are certain games, to be honest with you, the Lakers were always like that. As a Pacer fan, it always felt like they would go to, and I know that they've had some luck lately, but for years it was like even in down years for the Lakers, or they never played well out there.
He's averaging 31, 12, and 4 in 17 games against the Pacers.
That's an MVP caliber season for an MVP in his own right.
And the thing about Joel Embiid that is so, I guess, impressive, but at the same time enigmatic, is when you watch him. He is so laborious. He looks like he just Joel Embiid, and this is going way back on the Wayback Machine here. Joel Embiid is like basketball's Earl Campbell. Earl Campbell as a running back would have these runs where he just was unstoppable, and then would take 30, not literally, but it would take him forever to stand back up, and then he just kind of very just kind of go back slowly, to the huddle.
Joel Embiid is the poster child
and
for that in the
Embiid's
NBA,
that, right?
In that you feel like it took something out of him.
Totally.
All 37 of those points.
He scores, and then he turns around to go back down the floor, and he's lumbering down the floor. But yet the guy is totally, first off, I think he's listed in their roster as 6'11". That dude's 7'5".
It's the reverse high school.
I believe he's listed as 7 feet.
It's the reverse high school roster sheet where you're increasing the size.
Joel Embiid being 280 is like Donald Trump being 235. Zero chance.
Like me having whatever I said about the head size of a hat I wore.
Yeah, you said you had what'd you say, a 9 and an 8 hat?
Something like that. I can't remember.
I was
9 inches or something.
But Embiid is an extremely effective. He is a darn good player. Obviously, that goes without saying. But he's an MVP level player. If he doesn't go tonight, that certainly helps Indiana. But I think they have a chance even with him, because when he had an Embiid type night and a career night from a teammate, you still were in the game.
I will say, last thing on this, to Eddie's point about our tinfoil hat, it's a tough look for the league if on the one hand you are asking a player to not sit out for a nationally televised game because of load management tomorrow night, but the in-season tournament that you're wanting to pump up
good point.
To lose a star for
Really
that,
good
if
point.
he does sit out, it's a tough look for the league.
Pacers could go 2-0 in the in-season tournament, baby. Fire it up.
This is my way. This is how I win.
Today's plays of the day will start first with the State Farm's Champions Classic doubleheader from the United Center. College hoops are so back. We'll take Duke on the money line over Michigan State. In the nightcap, I'll scoop the 7 for the Kentucky Wildcats against Kansas. Another interesting top 25 battle can be Marquette at plus 110 on the money line and on the road against Illinois. In the NBA, we already mentioned it, Pacers on the money line over the 76ers, that at plus 164 juice. Tyrese Halliburton goes over 21.5 total points. Eddie, what do you like?
I'll take the over in the Pacers game tonight, 240.5. I think the tempo will be crazy with no Joel Embiid if he does not play. I don't play that over 240 if he does play, though, because it'll slow down a little bit. And I will take the Pacers team total over 117.5. No Nicola Batum today for 76ers, so I think their defense won't be as good.
I wonder what Greg Regstraw's play of the day is. He's in for J&B. We got 1 minute left, Greg. You got a play of the day? That's apparently a gambling term.
Tape the last segment of the show so I can take my daughter to her flute lessons at 6 o'clock.
Nice.
That's my play of the day.
Love that. It's a great play.
Yep. So I just ruined the magic of radio.
How's she doing with the flute?
This will be her second session.
Okay.
She made sound in session number 1. That is considered by those in the industry to be a win.
Nice. And how much does the flute cost?
I don't know. I have not checked my bank account yet. I think we are renting it to this point.
Okay, that's good.
Before we decide that this is really what we want to do.
I had a recorder. That's about as far as it went for me.
She has one of those as well. She's one of she is Indianapolis Children's Choir, so
that's right.
She's very musically gifted. This is her first non-school instrument. So
I've heard you're singing, so she gets it from you, correctly?
What's that?
I've heard you're singing, so she gets it from you, right?
Absolutely right. I made my statewide television debut not as a broadcaster, but as a singer. So
did you really?
Absolutely.
Cowboy Bob and Janie show or something?
Yeah, Evan Bai's 1991 Christmas special.
Nice. Okay.
I was -4.
Again, Greg, you want to feel old? Okay, so you can hear the dulcet tones of Greg until 6 o'clock today, right?
Till 5:30, we have the rare Tuesday edition of Colts Roundtable Live.
Gotcha.
People kind of wanted to sleep in, and don't worry about this being long because I'm the next host. I'm the substitute teacher. We can take this up to 3 o'clock. I don't care. And so anyway, yeah, I'll be filling in and yammering until 5:30.
I was happy you got here because I was ready to go at 2:55, which is what it is right now, right?
Okay, then get out of here.
Well, no, I don't have anything to do. I can hang out.
But you know what we won't do is swear on the air like some unorganized non-professionals that we know and have interacted with earlier today.
And people will be able to hear that later where?
On the ISC Sports Network.
That's right.
And tune in the first segment of the show, and thankfully I've heard the edit. FCC will not get involved.
Was there another food sponsor?
It was the beverage sponsor.
It was
yeah. We've had equal parts bombs now for both food and beverage on that show.
The fines go to Derek Schultz. That's Schultz, Derek. All right, Greg, have fun.
Thank you.
We will be listening. Greg Ragstra up next. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back with you tomorrow at noon.
Don't you love fall in Indy?